Rain smeared down the alley walls like oil on glass, turning broken pavement into something slick and dark. Two men stood in the middle of it, breathing hard, wearing badges that gleamed cheap under the red flicker of their cruiser's hazard lights. One had Jason Statham by the collar, dragging him across the alley like a trash bag. The other kicked over his duffel bag and scattered the contents: an old coat, a wrench, a folded photo, and a military-grade combat knife sealed in plastic. Neither of them noticed it. All they saw was a quiet, unshaved man who hadn't spoken a word since they grabbed him. One of the fake cops leaned in, sneering. He had that buzz-cut bully swagger, called him hobo, called him failure, told him to keep his mouth shut while they cleared the block. Their fake patrol car was parked sideways at the alley's edge, lights flashing, siren off. They weren't real cops. That much was obvious to anyone who'd spent real time on a street where silence meant survival. But Jason wasn't moving like someone caught. His breathing was steady. His eyes locked onto the one holding his bag, the sneering one, the one who finally made the mistake of flipping open Jason's wallet, the only thing he hadn't thrown to the wet ground. He blinked. The ID inside wasn't a license. It wasn't even a name. It was something black, sealed, government. And it had a red bar stamped across the back. Something even fakes knew to fear. He started to say something, but Jason was already moving. Elbow twisted, a boot slid, and the rain hit pavement with an echo that sounded like regret. But that moment, that wasn't where this started, days earlier. A Greyhound bus hissed its brakes and pulled off a freeway stop between two closed gas stations. Jason Statham stepped off, boots touching down with the sound of a man returning to ground he once swore he'd never see again. His coat was long, heavy, frayed at the sleeves. His hands were bare. No gloves, no gear. Just the duffel bag, a battered one, stitched and restitched, but held tight like it carried something heavier than tools. He didn't look around. He didn't need to. The city had changed, but not the corners. Not the gutters. Not the way eyes followed you from shadows if you looked like you didn't belong. He walked 2 blocks past the shelter, cut left at a boarded school, and stopped behind an old radiator shop that had once hidden more than metal. The place was gone now. Just a caved-in roof and a "coming soon" sign from a development company that never showed up. Jason dropped the bag against the wall and sat, not to rest, to wait, because he knew something was about to surface and he'd come back for it. He watched for 3 hours. Rain came, dried. Came again. Foot traffic changed. The block's tempo shifted. But one thing never did. The black SUV that circled the neighborhood like a vulture too fat to fly away. Its windows were tinted, plates clean. But the antenna setup, military spec, and the decals, law enforcement, but off. Just slightly off. Jason saw it all from under his coat. Around the corner, the fake cops were running a fake sweep. Not on crime, on people. The kind who didn't get a lawyer when they vanished. Homeless men, women, kids who slept behind vending machines. They'd cuff them, search them, take what they wanted, sometimes worse. Sometimes much worse, and this time they saw Jason sitting still, alone. He didn't flinch when they stopped, didn't speak when they asked for ID, didn't raise a hand when they stepped in. He let them take him, not because he was afraid, but because it was time. They dragged him to the alley, the same alley now glowing in police red. One held him down. The other ransacked the duffel, laughed at the photo. The old photo. Jason's fingers twitched when it hit the wet pavement, but he didn't move. He stared at the man's boots instead, measured his stance, the weight on his left leg, the way he reached for his belt like he was used to carrying something heavier than a taser. They weren't cops. They were something hired. And now they were close. Too close. The moment broke when the wallet opened. The silent one saw it first. The classified tag. The encryption stamp. The shadow seal from a division that doesn't exist. His eyes changed. The look of someone who just realized he'd stepped into something meant to stay buried. He glanced at Jason, and Jason looked back. And in that look was a message. You shouldn't have opened that. Jason moved with precision. Elbow up, chin tucked, shoulder roll. The arm holding him twisted until bone cracked. The fake cop dropped. The other drew too late. Jason's boot was already planted in his chest, sending him into the trunk of their cruiser. Jason retrieved the wallet and the photo. Didn't touch the knife. Yet. He stood in the middle of the alley while one groaned and the other crawled toward a panic button hidden inside the car. Jason didn't stop him. He let him hit it, because Jason wasn't done yet and he wanted them to come. 2 hours earlier across the city, someone had called in a favor, a woman, mid-40s, worn coat, sharp eyes. She worked intake at a soup kitchen and used to decode field reports in a past life no one believed. She'd seen the SUV, knew something was off, called an old number from memory, didn't expect an answer, but Jason had answered, and now he was here. She hadn't told him everything. Just enough to bring him back. Just enough to make him walk 2 miles from the station instead of calling in a favor with satellites or drones or people who still owed him blood. He wanted to see it for himself, and now he had. The fake cops weren't working alone. Jason knew that. Too organized. Too confident. Too precise in their fear when they realized who he was. This was bigger than two punks with stolen badges. This was part of something spreading, something that cleaned the streets in ways no real department would sign off on, and it had just touched the wrong man. Jason stepped into the SUV before backup arrived. He found the dash cam, downloaded it, found their internal channel, the one they used to communicate off-grid. He activated the mic, and in a calm, low voice, he sent a message that would bounce through every fake patrol unit in the city. He said nothing threatening, just 3 words, "You chose wrong." And then he stepped back into the alley, rain falling again, the sound of real sirens now. Someone had called in the takedown, but it wouldn't be Jason getting arrested. No. It would be 2 fake cops explaining why their database had just been breached by a ghost, and why an entire block's worth of camera feeds were now missing 20 minutes of time. Sirens neared, but Jason Statham didn't flinch. He stood alone in the alley while the 2 fake officers moaned on the wet ground behind him. The patrol cruiser's lights spun in the mist, red and blue, flashing across the brick walls like a fever dream. Jason's breath rose steady, eyes trained not on the street ahead but on the rooftops listening. Because what was coming wasn't police, it was containment. A response team, silent, fast, and absolutely not wearing badges. A drone buzzed above, quiet, almost organic. Jason stepped back into shadow and let the city swallow him. He didn't need to fight yet, he just needed to vanish. And like that, he was gone before the first responder rounded the corner. The real cops arrived confused. No suspect. Just 2 down uniforms and an SUV filled with corrupted logs. But blocks away, Jason was already walking. Not fast, not rushed, controlled, moving through the back alleys of a city that thought it had forgotten him. Behind him, the system he just cracked was scrambling to understand what kind of man they'd just tried to rough up, and who had access to the kind of credentials Jason carried. Inside a stark concrete building deep in the city's neglected East Quarter, the real threat sat in silence. A man named Lennox, hair cropped short, wearing a white shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbow. Not a cop, not military, he existed between. Surveillance footage from the alley flickered on a muted screen behind him. His eyes didn't blink. He watched Jason Statham move with precision. Watched him disable 2 trained enforcers in under 4 seconds. Watched him disappear. Lennox leaned forward, unmoved. He remembered that face. Years ago, they'd been on opposite sides of a corridor in Kosovo. Jason was supposed to be dead back then, supposed to be untraceable, buried under operations that didn't exist. But now he was back, and Lennox felt something he hadn't felt in years, regret. Meanwhile, across town, Jason arrived at the shelter. It was a dim place tucked between 2 shuttered businesses. The sign out front flickered when it worked at all. He walked through the side entrance where the woman from the soup kitchen, her name was Marla, was pouring coffee for a teenager who looked like he hadn't slept in days. When she saw Jason, her hands paused but didn't tremble. She just nodded to the back hallway. She didn't need words. She knew. In the back office, Jason sat in a low chair surrounded by mismatched filing cabinets. A single fan rattled in the corner. He didn't speak for a moment, just unfolded the photograph the fake cop had dropped. It was slightly torn now, water-streaked. It showed 4 people, Jason, a woman, a man with a cigar, and a boy, none of them smiling, all of them in the same room, same shadows, same silence. The kind of photo you don't keep unless you owe something to the dead. Marla entered, closing the door behind her. She spoke carefully, giving names. Lennox, the sweep teams, the black SUV units. It started 3 months ago, she said. People vanished. Shelters stopped asking questions. The ones that did burned down. Jason's eyes stayed locked on the photo. Then he finally asked if the boy in the photo was safe. Marla hesitated. she told him the boy, Nathan, was taken 3 nights ago. Right off the street, Jason didn't speak. He just stood far across the city. Lennox was already on the move. His men, clean-cut plainclothes built for efficiency, were tracking Jason's heat signature from where the SUV was breached. Jason knew it. He wanted it that way. The breach wasn't an escape. It was bait. Back at the shelter, Marla warned Jason that Nathan wasn't the only one. People were being moved, not killed, but disappeared. Jason asked why they were still alive. That's when Marla gave him the hard truth. The people being taken had something in common. Not background, not history. They were watchers, veterans, former scouts, people who'd seen things and gone quiet. Someone was building a silent army and culling the rest. Jason's hands tightened. He told her to leave the shelter. She said no. He stared at her. She stared back. Jason didn't argue again. He simply walked out the door and vanished into the rain. That night, the false cops regrouped under Lennox's command. They gathered in a sealed parking garage, red lights humming on motion sensors. Lennox stood before a wall of monitors. Jason's photo, grainy, old, and flagged in a dozen untraceable files, sat in the center. He told his team the truth. They weren't chasing a vagrant. They were chasing a shadow with clearance beyond theirs. A man trained to end things cleanly, quietly, without leaving blood on walls. They would not engage unless cornered. But Lennox didn't believe they'd corner him. He knew Jason would come. Back in the city, Jason moved through tunnels. Even the police didn't patrol anymore. Old maintenance corridors, sewage maps etched into his memory from a time he'd worked under them. Not for money, but because something darker was being buried underneath. He emerged from one of them inside a half-demolished warehouse that had once stored decommissioned military servers. Inside, rats scattered. But Jason wasn't looking for them. He was looking for the crate. It was still there, rusty, sealed with an old lock. He opened it with a single twist of an improvised key hidden inside his coat lining. Inside, a tactical vest, a locked metal case, and a satellite phone with no manufacturer label. He didn't touch the vest yet. He opened the metal case. Inside was a tracker, the same kind Lennox's men were using. Jason activated it and let it ping briefly. He wanted Lennox to know he was awake now. Then he turned it off. He picked up the photo again and stared longer this time. A quiet moment. The camera should hold, rain tapping on the steel rooftop above. No music, just Jason alone, remembering someone who meant something. Someone who didn't survive what came next in that original photo. And then movement, a noise at the warehouse entrance. A gloved figure stepping through. Jason didn't move. He waited. The man came closer, no weapon raised. He was one of Lennox's scouts sent ahead. Young, overconfident. Jason waited until he was close enough to smell the cold off his coat, then dropped him with a single blow to the neck. Jason dragged the unconscious scout inside the shadows, stripped him of comms, and sent his earpiece back active. Then he spoke into it. This time, he didn't whisper. This time he said, "If you want to know what happened in that photo, ask Lennox. He knows why I disappeared." And then he crushed the earpiece under his boot. Lennox, now back in the command van, heard the line before the channel went dead. His hand trembled, for the first time. Because the mission from all those years ago, the one that created ghosts, they buried Jason in it, and now he dug his way out. The next morning, the city woke to a quiet shift. Nobody noticed it. Not the commuters. Not the politicians shaking hands in polished offices. But in every street camera, every precinct server, every encrypted channel used by Lennox's units, one file silently replaced them all. A photo. The same one Jason had recovered from his bag. 4 people. A boy, a woman, a man with a cigar, and Jason Statham. The message wasn't in words. It was in who sent it and who was in the photo. Lennox saw it first. Inside the command center, his screen filled with the image. He leaned closer, reading the metadata buried inside the upload. A ghost signature. A timestamp. Coordinates pointing not to a hideout but to a rooftop directly above his operations hub. He turned to his men. Lock it down. But it was already too late. On the rooftop, Jason was watching still, calm. He wasn't armed in the usual sense. No guns slung. No rifles pointed. Just a single drop pack at his feet. The same bag he'd carried since the alley. Inside, the final piece of the trap. The fake cops had seen Jason as a nobody, a stray in a forgotten coat. But the truth was, Jason didn't lose his past, he hid it. And this morning he stopped hiding. Inside the command van, Lennox's comms began shorting. White noise broke through the headsets. His tactical map went black. One by one, feeds dropped. Jason hadn't just sent a message. He'd infected the network. Years ago, Jason and Lennox were part of the same mission. A disavowed extraction in Eastern Europe where they were ordered to pull out an asset, the woman in the photo. But Lennox broke the plan, took payment to tip off the other side. The woman died. The boy vanished. Jason was left for dead, but he didn't die. He buried what was left, locked away the records, and disappeared. Until the boy resurfaced, until Nathan was taken. Now the boy wasn't just a memory. He was leverage, a target, and a symbol of every failure Jason had left unresolved. On the rooftop, Jason opened the drop pack. He wasn't alone now. The message he'd sent didn't just warn Lennox. It summoned someone else, Marla. She appeared from a stairwell doorway, breath low, coat soaked. She carried a flash drive wrapped in cloth. Inside it, the final piece, proof of where Nathan had been taken. A former off-grid government site now converted into a conditioning facility for training shadows. Lennox was building something far bigger than a sweep team. Jason took the drive, nodded once to Marla, and said the only thing he needed to: stay low. She didn't argue this time. He turned, disappeared down the fire escape, and within minutes was gone. Hours later, Jason stood on the perimeter of the compound. It wasn't guarded like a fortress, because it wasn't meant to be found. No fences. Just an abandoned telecom plant hidden behind power substations and flood-damaged roads, but underground. That was different. Jason waited until the guard rotation shifted. Then he moved. One takedown at the gate, one under the stairwell. No alarms, no trace. The kind of silence that only ghosts leave behind. Inside, the facility was colder. Fluorescence flickered above white concrete halls. He passed unarmed staff researchers, none of whom realized who he was. They weren't soldiers. They were watchers, data men. They didn't stop him. They couldn't. By the time he reached the sublevel, the tracker in his pocket pinged once. Nathan was here, room 014. Jason didn't break the door. He just stepped in. Inside, a boy about 15, pale, eyes sharp, a camera in the ceiling, 2 speakers embedded in the wall, no restraints. Just psychological pressure. Nathan looked up when Jason entered and didn't move. Jason paused, looked at him. Something passed between them, not recognition, but resemblance. Then Nathan said, "You're the one from the photo." Jason nodded once. He didn't smile. He stepped forward, gently pulled the surveillance cable from the wall, then motioned for the boy to follow. They moved fast. Jason led Nathan through an alternate exit, a ventilation corridor he'd used to enter. But they didn't make it far before Lennox appeared at the corridor's mouth. Gun drawn, eyes colder than before. Nathan froze behind Jason. Lennox didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You're not leaving with him." Jason stepped forward. He didn't flinch at the weapon, and for the first time he spoke clearly. "You left us in that building. I buried her." Lennox shifted, almost faltering but not quite. "You're obsolete," he said. Jason didn't respond. He just moved. What followed wasn't a brawl. It was judgment. Lennox fired, but Jason had already sidestepped. The shot cracked off concrete. Jason closed the gap, knocked the weapon aside, and drove a blow into Lennox's ribs. Another to the throat. The fight wasn't loud, just brutal, clinical. Lennox got one strike in, but it was desperate, a grasp at Jason's coat. Jason ripped the grip free and drove Lennox against the wall. Held him there and let him speak. Lennox coughed, blood trailing from his lip. He said, "They'll still come. You can't stop it." Jason leaned close. "I'm not here to stop it," he said. "I'm here to end you." And then silence. Lennox crumpled to the ground, alive but exposed. Jason retrieved the flash drive from his pocket and slipped it into Lennox's front shirt pocket. A gift inside it. The files that would tie Lennox to every vanishing, every black op, every site. Jason left him there. He and Nathan disappeared into the tunnels. The next morning, the compound was surrounded, not by Jason, by real federal agents, tipped anonymously. The files were broadcast to 5 independent journalists, 2 senators, and 1 anonymous public archive. Jason's face never appeared in the report, but Nathan's did. He was identified as a survivor, a witness, and a symbol of what remained when shadows fought back. Weeks later, Jason stood on a remote coastline. No city, no noise, just sea. Beside him, Nathan, still quiet, still processing. Jason handed him the photograph, told him to keep it. Nathan asked who the woman was. Jason didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. Nathan didn't ask again. He just folded the photo and pocketed it. Jason looked out at the water, not for escape, but peace, for once. And for the first time since the alley, he allowed himself to breathe.